Dead America, Tales from Las Vegas, Sammy's Greed by Derek Slayton. Chapter 1. The sun was barely half an hour over the horizon as Landry stood on the second floor of a massive wooden deck. An expensive outdoor seating area stretched before him, complete with cushioned chairs and a glass-top table that probably cost more than his truck back home. The furniture fit the motif of the sprawling mansion that had been gifted to him and Ace in the early hours of the outbreak by Sammy. Everything about the place screamed wealth and excess, from the imported tiles to the designer outdoor furniture. Landry looked out towards the lake, which was partially visible through the gaps between two other large houses. The sun reflected off the water, mirroring the faint reds and orange hues still visible in the sky. His hands gripped the railing as he took in the view, trying to find some peace in the moment. A light breeze rolled across the deck, carrying with it the scent of the lake mixed with something faintly acrid. Smoke, most likely, from fires burning somewhere in the distance. Despite the beautiful view, Landry knew that what was transpiring below was anything but. As the weeks had gone by, Sammy and his loyalists had solidified their grip on the Lake Las Vegas community. People who had been captains of industry were reduced to little more than terrified serfs who did Sammy's bidding without question. The transformation had been swift, brutal, and efficient. "Morning, Landry," a voice called out from behind him. Ace staggered outside from the open patio door, wearing nothing but a pair of pajama bottoms. He stretched once he got onto the patio, a handful of scars on his torso illuminated by the early morning light. The marks were old, remnants of a life before all this. "How you doing, Ace? Sleep all right?" Landry asked. "About as good as one can given the situation," Ace said. "So you heard the gunshots last night too, huh?" Landry asked. Ace finished his stretch and scratched at his chest, looking out towards the lake with tired eyes. "In my mind, they were at the wall," Ace said. "Do you want me to ruin your tranquil fairy tale with reality?" Landry asked. Ace finished stretching before going in for a long yawn, shaking his head as he did so. "Maybe after some coffee. Not sure my brain can handle reality at the moment," Ace said. "I have some brewing in the kitchen," Landry said. Ace nodded as the two men walked back into the house, moving slowly as their bodies were worn down from the constant strain of the previous weeks. Almost daily battles with the undead had taken their toll, along with securing the goods they would need in order to survive for the long haul. Every muscle ached, every joint protested movement. But that was only part of the battle, as they also had to contend with Sammy. The good days were ones where they avoided him completely, however, the bad days were draining both mentally and physically. His demands of his private army in the early days were somewhat justifiable, even reasonable given the situation. Venture out, find food and supplies, and make sure the community was locked down tight. As time went along, however, his demands got more eccentric. First it was raiding liquor stores for the brands he liked. That morphed into retrieving items that his business rivals had refused to sell him in life. Petty revenge wrapped up in the guise of survival. Then there were the things that Sammy didn't bother asking Landry to do, knowing that he would refuse. Despite being the top man on the security force, even Landry wasn't privy to what those requests entailed. Only that Sammy relied on his most loyal servants to retrieve them. The thought made his stomach turn every time it crossed his mind. "So, are we leaving the house today?" Ace asked. Landry walked over to the coffee pot, pouring them both a cup, and sliding one across the granite countertop to Ace. The dark liquid steamed in the cool air of the kitchen. "I think we have to," Landry said. "Aw man, did Sammy send over another request while I was out?" Ace asked. "No, which is exactly why I want to get out and about. I'd rather he not find us to send us on another errand," Landry said. Ace nodded as he drank some of his coffee, savoring the warmth. The bitter taste was a welcome comfort, something normal in a world gone mad. Before he could speak, there was a knock at the door. Both men dropped their heads at the sound. "So much for that," Ace said. Both men grabbed their coffee cups and walked to the front door, opening it up to reveal one of the younger community members, Brody. The kid looked nervous, his eyes darting back and forth like he expected someone to jump out at him. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air, and his breathing was quick and shallow. Before they could greet him, he pushed his way inside, shutting the door in a hurry. The lock clicked into place as he twisted the deadbolt. His hands were shaking as he did so, the adrenaline clearly pumping through his system. "Why don't you come in, Brody?" Landry asked. Landry spoke in a mocking tone as he playfully gestured for him to come inside, though he was already well past the threshold. "I really need to talk to you, Landry," Brody said. "We don't have anything to talk about," Landry said. "Bullshit. I know you're just as tired of Sammy as the rest of us, and it's time to do something about it," Brody said. Landry and Ace shared a concerned look, both of them playing dumb. The walls had ears in this community, and speaking openly about Sammy was a quick way to end up on the wrong side of his inner circle. "We really have no idea what you're talking about, Brody," Ace said. The young man stared Ace down, his jaw set and his eyes unwavering. The intensity of his gaze was enough to break through the facade. Ace gave a reluctant nod, knowing that he was right. "Fine. If it means you getting out of my house so I can properly wake up, say your piece," Ace said. "You see the way he treats us, ordering his security goons to rough us up," Brody said. Ace and Landry gave Brody a curious look, their brows furrowing. Brody caught himself and backtracked. "You know damn well I'm not talking about the two of you. It's the rest of them. One of those pricks broke Brandon Carter's arm last night. All because Brandon had the audacity to look in their direction for a second too long," Brody said. "I can tell you for starters that it's not everybody," Ace said. "Ace is right. There are a few former soldiers on the team. The problem is with Sammy's inner circle," Landry said. "His inner circle? Aren't you in charge?" Brody asked. Ace and Landry exchanged another glance, shaking their heads in unison. "Yeah, Brody, we're in charge of the day-to-day operations around here, making sure that the zombies outside these walls don't get inside. But that's not what his inner circle is for," Landry said. "Who in the hell is his inner circle?" Brody asked. "It's a lot of the guards, men and women who owe a lot to Sammy," Ace said. "Yeah, some of it is monetary, but most of them are people who were forgotten by society that Sammy rescued," Landry said. "Rescued? He doesn't strike me as a great humanitarian," Brody said. "Oh, he's not. His version of rescue is like taking a dog that is roaming the streets and putting a short leash on it. Sure, they have food and shelter, but they know they can be put down at any time by the others who don't want to lose their newfound perks," Landry said. Brody contemplated things for a moment, his face cycling through different emotions. Recognition, disgust, and finally resignation. He eventually shook his head at the realization. "Well, that explains some of the rumors about Sammy's new guests," Brody said. Ace and Landry exchanged another look, almost afraid to ask what Brody was talking about. The way he said it made their blood run cold. Before they could speak, there was a banging at the door, putting the three of them on edge. Ace moved quickly to the door, peeking out from the side of the window. His expression darkened. "Damn it, it's Miles," Ace said. "That's not good," Landry said. "Is Miles one of Sammy's inner circle?" Brody asked. "He's the leader of them," Landry said. There was more violent banging on the door, followed by some muffled yelling coming from Miles. The sound echoed through the house, making the windows rattle slightly. "What do we do? This doesn't look good, us talking with Brody," Ace said. Landry contemplated for a second before looking straight at Brody. His expression was serious, apologetic even. "You need to follow my lead and do exactly what I say, and just know that nothing I'm about to say or do is personal," Landry said. "Do what you gotta do, man," Brody said. Landry looked over to Ace, nodding for him to open the door. As it opened up, Miles was standing there, agitated. Miles was a tall, hulking beast of a man, over 6 feet, but carrying around some extra weight that hung over his belt. He was in his late 40s, but looked older due to not taking great care of himself over the years. His face was red with irritation, and there was a sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the cool air. Dark circles hung under his eyes, and his knuckles were scraped and bruised. Fresh wounds from the look of them. "It's about damn time. What the hell took you so long, Ace?" Miles asked. Ace stood there, shirtless, drinking his coffee slowly before responding. The dislike between the two men was evident in their tones and body language. "You should be thanking me, Miles. I wasn't wearing pants when you knocked," Ace said. Miles muttered curses and insults under his breath as he pushed by Ace into the house. He began talking, but interrupted himself as soon as he saw Brody. His eyes lit up like a predator spotting prey. Well, what do we have here? I thought the boss made it clear that the guards weren't to be congregating with the commoners. Miles said. Miles looked at them as if he caught them doing something they weren't supposed to be doing, licking his lips like he was excited to tattle on them. The expression on his face was smug, satisfied. I caught this little bastard going through my trash this morning. I guess he was hoping we threw away some scraps from last night's dinner, Landry said. Miles got excited, stepping up towards Brody, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Boy, you're going to wish you hadn't done that, Miles said. Relax, Miles, I've already doled out my punishment, Landry said. Miles grumbled before beginning to respond, only to be cut off by Landry turning to Brody. In one swift motion, Landry smacked him across the face and grabbed onto his shirt, pulling him close. Now you go grab that thermos off the counter, fill it with coffee, and run it down to the guard shack at the south end of the golf course, Landry said. Landry gave Brody a wink, getting him to play along and to non-verbally apologize for smacking him. The ploy worked as Brody nodded, his cheek red, but his eyes understanding. Yes, sir, I'll have it down there in a flash, Brody said. If it's not there in 20 minutes, it's your ass, Landry said. Brody nodded and ran off into the kitchen. The sound of cabinet doors opening and closing filled the silence. Landry turned back to Miles, who didn't look too pleased. The punishment is a little light if you ask me, Miles said. I didn't ask you. Now what do you want? Landry asked. The boss wants to see you. Now. Chapter 2. Landry, Ace, and Miles walked across the neighborhood towards Sammy's house. The morning sun was climbing higher now, warming the pavement beneath their feet. As they went, Ace and Landry could see people who were outside, enjoying the morning, quickly moving back into their houses, as if the mere sight of Miles was enough to strike fear into them. A man watering his lawn turned off the hose mid-spray and hurried inside. A woman sitting on her porch with a book stood up and disappeared through her front door without even closing it behind her. The exodus was swift and telling. Even a pair of kids playing basketball in a driveway abandoned their game, one of them dropping the ball and letting it roll into the street. So, any idea what Sammy wants? Ace asked. You're just going to have to wait and see, pretty boy, Miles said. Miles had venom in his tone, which Ace just shook off. He'd been called worse by better men. Were there any issues at the wall overnight? Landry asked. How in the hell should I know? That's your job, isn't it? Miles asked. Landry bit his tongue, not out of fear of Miles, but more out of not wanting to get into it with him. He knew that Miles was after his job and full control of the security force, and he didn't want to give him any ammunition to make a case to Sammy. The power struggle was always there, simmering beneath the surface. They walked the remaining few blocks in relative silence, nobody daring to come outside and risk the wrath of Miles. The streets were empty except for the three of them, their footsteps echoing off the expensive homes. Birds chirped from somewhere nearby, oblivious to the tension below. Curtains moved in windows as they passed, people watching from the safety of their homes. The community that had once been filled with laughter and conversation was now a place where people hid from their own security force. It was a sad state of affairs, but it was the reality they lived in now. As they got to Sammy's place, Miles stopped before reaching for the door. He turned to face them, his expression serious. The boss has been on a good roll lately, so when you talk to him, make sure you keep your voices down, Miles said. So he has a hangover? Ace asked. If he is, that hangover costs more than you've ever made in your life, Miles said. Ace waited for Miles to turn his back to him before rolling his eyes. The gesture was small, but it helped him maintain his composure. Sammy's man reached for the door, turning the knob quietly and pushing it open. Both Landry and Ace recoiled at the smell coming from inside, a combination of sweat, spilled drinks that hadn't been cleaned up in days, and various other scents they didn't want to contemplate. The odor hit them like a physical force, making their eyes water. It was the smell of excess and decay, a fitting metaphor for what was happening to the community under Sammy's rule. Miles waved them in, and the three of them stepped inside. Gone was the meticulously kept mansion, and in its stead was what looked like the remnants of a frat party. The marble floors that were once spotless were now sticky underfoot. Cups, plates, and clothes were scattered about. One of the large overstuffed recliners was laying on its back, the legs sticking up in the air. A couple of underdressed women were passed out on the couch, curled up together under a single blanket. Empty bottles littered the floor, some standing upright, while others had rolled under furniture. The expensive artwork on the walls hung crooked, and there were stains on the white carpet that ran down the hallway. A chandelier overhead was missing several crystals, and condensation rings marked the wood of an antique table near the entrance. Ace instinctively turned on the charm, but quickly dropped it once the realization hit him. These women weren't here by choice. They were prisoners, no matter how nice the accommodations might be. The smile faded from his face, replaced by something harder. "Who are the ladies? I don't recognize them from the community," Landry said. Miles got a creepy grin on his face as he spoke in a tone that made the other's skin crawl. His eyes lit up with a disturbing pride. "Oh, they were a special acquisition we obtained for Sammy. A couple of nights ago, we were listening to Midnight Mike's show, and some dancers from a nearby club called in. They were holed up there, running low on supplies. So me and some of the boys rode over and gave them an offer," Miles said. His chest puffed out as he spoke, clearly proud of what he'd done. Landry felt his jaw tighten, but kept his expression neutral. "Let me guess. It was an offer that they couldn't refuse?" Ace asked. "Oh, they could refuse it, but if they did, we were going to break down the front door and lay on the horn to let everything in the area know it was happy hour. Lo and behold, they took us up on the offer to come hang out with Sammy," Miles said. The way he said it made it sound like they'd been invited to a party, like this was all perfectly normal. The disconnect between his tone and the reality of what he was describing made Landry's stomach turn. Miles perked up as he heard footsteps coming from the other end of the hallway. The sound was heavy, unsteady. Landry and Ace were sickened at what they were seeing, but kept a straight face, especially with Sammy stomping down the hallway. "Miles, Miles, is that you?" Sammy called out. "I'm right here, boss," Miles said. Sammy staggered out from around the corner, wearing a tight-fit pair of boxers and a silk robe. The robe was expensive, probably designer, but hung open and wrinkled. He had a half-empty bottle of liquor in one hand, and given his staggering, it was clear he had been working on the bottle recently. His hair was disheveled, sticking up at odd angles. Stubble covered his jaw, and his eyes were red and puffy. The man who had once commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals now looked like he'd been sleeping in a gutter. Good. I need you to head back out. The newest gifts you brought me are putting a hurting on the previous gift you brought me," Sammy said. Sammy held up the liquor bottle, gesturing towards the women sleeping in the next room. "Yeah, you all drink way too much. This is my stash, not yours," Sammy said. Sammy yelled a bit as he struggled to keep his footing. His body swayed back and forth, like a tree in a strong wind. Miles reached out, making sure the boss didn't hit the ground. As soon as his hand touched Sammy's arm, Miles received a glare from Sammy. The look was sharp, dangerous despite his intoxicated state. Before Sammy could lay into his subordinate, he looked over and noticed Ace and Landry standing there. His expression shifted, recognition dawning on his face. "Hey Landry, Ace, good to see you're falling in line and pitching in around here. Miles, take these two with you when you head out," Sammy said. "Where are we going, sir?" Ace asked. "Where are you going?" Sammy asked. Sammy trailed off, taking a swig of liquor before laughing and continuing. The sound was harsh, grating. "You're going to go out there and get me some more liquor, and I only want the good stuff," Sammy said. He waved the bottle in his hand for emphasis, some of the liquid sloshing out and splashing on the floor. He didn't seem to notice or care. Sammy stood there for a moment, thinking before shaking his head. His eyes were bloodshot, barely focusing on the men in front of him. "You know what? Just grab everything you can, even the cheap stuff. I'm not sure my new guests could tell the difference anyway, so they'll be happy with the swill I give them," Sammy said. Sammy waved his hand, dismissing the group, but before he could go, Miles spoke up. "We will get that done right now, sir. Is there anything else we can get for you while we are out?" Miles asked. Ace started to roll his eyes at the epic levels of ass-kissing happening before him, but Landry quickly smacked his arm, getting him to stop. Now wasn't the time. "Yeah, you know what, Miles? There is. You know that little boutique specialty food shop? You know the one I'm talking about. It was down past the supercenter," Sammy said. "Yes, sir. I know exactly where you're talking about," Miles said. "Good. I want you to go there and clean it out. If it looks tasty, grab it," Sammy said. "Yes, sir. You'll be eating and drinking good in no time flat," Miles said. Sammy raised the bottle to salute him, as he turned around and began shambling back towards his bedroom at the rear of the house. His robe trailed behind him, one sleeve dragging on the floor. Once they heard the door slam shut, Miles turned to the others, motioning for them to head outside. A moment later, they were through the door, Miles carefully shutting it behind them. The fresh air was a welcome relief after the stench inside. "All right, you heard the man. We're making a run. Load out in 10, docks in 15. Let's move like we have a purpose," Miles said. Miles hastily moved away from the house, going to make the preparations. His stride was quick, purposeful. Landry and Ace stood there for a moment, waiting until Miles was out of earshot before talking. "I'm starting to think Brody was right. We might need to do something," Ace said. "I agree, but we're outnumbered 5-1, and that's assuming every competent guard is on our side, and I'm not confident they will be," Landry said. His voice was low, barely above a whisper. They couldn't risk being overheard, not when the consequences would be so severe. "Even when we tell them about," Ace said. Ace gestured back towards the house, prompting Landry to shake his head. The motion was firm, final. "Don't underestimate comfort outweighing doing what's right. If they join us and we don't succeed, they'll be dead, or worse," Landry said. "What's worse than being dead?" Ace asked. "Being cast outside these walls," Landry said. Ace thought about the prospect of having to fend for himself, out in the zombie-filled apocalypse. The creatures were everywhere, waiting for any opportunity to tear into living flesh. Out there, alone, without the walls and the resources, a man wouldn't last long. Maybe a few days if he was lucky, maybe only a few hours if he wasn't. He shuddered at the thought, a cold feeling running down his spine. "So, what do we do then?" Ace asked. Landry thought for a moment, letting out a sigh as reality washed over him. The weight of their situation pressed down on his shoulders. They were trapped, caught between doing what was right and surviving. For now, survival had to come first. "We do the only thing we can do. We play along until an opportunity presents itself." Chapter 3. Landry and Ace walked over towards the armory, the general unease about their situation permeating just beneath the surface. The building was a converted garage, reinforced with steel plates on the doors and bars over the windows. Someone had spray-painted "Authorized Personnel Only" across the front in large red letters. They nodded to the guard standing by the door as they walked into the building. The guard nodded back, his face expressionless as he stepped aside to let them pass. Inside they found Miles, who was excitedly getting armed up for the excursion. They noticed him grabbing an assault rifle and multiple magazines worth of ammunition, followed by 2 handguns, one on each side of his body, and a couple different knives slid into his vest and boots. He looked like he was preparing for an invasion rather than a supply run. The weapons gleamed under the fluorescent lights of the armory, and Miles handled each one with a disturbing familiarity. He checked the action on the rifle, loaded a magazine, and racked the charging handle with a satisfied grin. "So, I'm assuming we're gearing up for war then?" Ace asked. "Oh, you have to. You never know what you're going to encounter out there. You should have seen what we had to do in order to get Sammy's new playthings out of that building. It's not just those zombie bastards you have to worry about, you know?" Miles asked. Ace and Landry did their best to ignore what Miles was saying, not wanting to focus on how many innocent lives may have been cut down by him. The thought of what he'd done made their blood run cold, but they couldn't show it. As they started to get prepared, grabbing assault rifles and sidearms of their own, the door to the armory was thrown open. 2 people waltzed in, locking eyes with Miles, giving him a nod. Skylar was a woman in her mid-30s, but looked like life had put her through the ringer. She looked healthy now, but it was clear in her movements that her previous life was still taking a toll. There was a slight tremor in her hands when she reached for weapons, and her eyes had the look of someone who'd seen too much. Her clothes hung loose on her frame, suggesting she'd lost weight recently. Despite all that, she moved with confidence, the kind that came from surviving things that would have broken most people. "What's up, Miles? We ready to do this?" Skylar asked. "Oh, you know it, Skylar. And I see you finally convinced Grant to join us," Miles said. "I had to threaten him with physical violence, but he got on board," Skylar said. Skylar spoke in a mocking tone as she reached over to the young man standing next to her, wrapping her arm around his head and messing with his hair. Grant stood there, taking the playful abuse, not wanting to rock the boat. His face flushed red, but he kept his mouth shut. Grant was one of the newer members of Sammy's inner circle, Landry and Ace didn't know much about him, outside of the fact that he had stuck close to Miles and Skylar ever since he started working for them. He couldn't have been more than 20, with a thin frame that suggested he'd been hungry for most of the outbreak. His eyes darted around nervously, never settling on one thing for too long. He wore clothes that were too big for him, probably scavenged from someone else. There was an eagerness about him, a desperation to prove himself that made Landry uncomfortable. "I just figured it was time for me to step up," Grant said. Miles slung the rifle over his shoulder, walking to the young man, looking him in the eye, and speaking as if he was a big brother. The gesture would have been touching if it wasn't Miles doing it. "You just stick with me out there, kid, and you'll be fine," Miles said. Grant wasn't so sure of himself, but nodded. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "All right, get your shit and be at the docks in 5. We have a busy day ahead, and we're already burning daylight. Let's move," Miles said. Miles walked out of the building as the two newcomers got their gear. The sound of metal clanking and magazines being loaded filled the space. Landry and Ace grabbed the rest of their gear, walking out and heading towards the docks. They waited until they were out of earshot of anybody before talking. "So we're following Miles's orders now?" Ace asked. "As long as he's doing what I would do, I don't see a reason to push back," Landry said. "Isn't that going to embolden him?" Ace asked. "He's already emboldened. If I'm going to have a public disagreement with him, I'd rather it be out there where he can't call for reinforcements," Landry said. Ace thought about the logic for a moment before nodding in agreement. It made sense, even if he didn't like it. The duo remained quiet as they walked the rest of the way to the docks, standing by the boat as Miles got it ready. The water lapped against the wooden posts, the sound peaceful despite the tension in the air. "Well, don't just stand there, Ace. Give me a hand," Miles said. Ace let out a sigh before helping Miles prep the boat. He untied the ropes from the cleats, coiling them neatly despite his irritation. As he did, Landry stood on the dock, looking out across the way to where the vehicles were. There were a smattering of corpses on the ground, but nothing still standing. The bodies had been there for days, bloating in the sun. He kept watch as they waited on the others to arrive, and a few moments later, Skylar and Grant showed up, loaded out like they were going to invade a small nation. Grant was struggling under the weight of all his gear, his vest sagging with the magazines stuffed into every pocket. "All right, everybody in the boat, let's do this," Miles said. The group loaded up in the small boat, taking their seats as Miles started up the engine. Within seconds, they were speeding across the open water, seemingly unconcerned with the noise they were making. The bow cut through the lake, sending spray up on either side. Grant gripped his seat tightly, his knuckles white. The wind whipped at their faces, and the sun reflected off the water in a way that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Behind them, the community grew smaller, the walls and houses shrinking into the distance. As they approached the opposite shore, a lone zombie shambled out from behind one of the walls, drawn to the engine noise. The creature moved with the slow, awkward gait of one that had been reanimated for more than a few days. Miles got an excited look on his face as he pulled the boat up to the dock. Rather than jump out, he reached down for Grant, yanking him to his feet and shoving him forward. The kid stumbled, barely catching himself on the edge of the boat. "What are you doing?" Grant asked. "Giving you a chance to earn your keep. You know what to do. Just pop that thing in the head one good time," Miles said. Grant hesitated for a moment, looking at the far end of the dock at the lumbering creature getting closer to them. His breathing quickened and sweat beaded on his forehead. "Jesus Christ, kid! Find your damn balls and go put a bullet in its head. If you can't handle one of them, you're not used to us out here," Skylar said. "Yeah, and you can swim back to shore. Now, what's it gonna be?" Miles asked. Grant took a deep breath, finally pulling himself up onto the dock. He yanked his sidearm free, cocking the hammer back as he walked towards the zombie. His hands shook slightly, making the gun waver. Grant stopped a few yards from the creature, staring at it and hesitating. This was the first zombie he had seen up close, and it terrified him for a moment. The ghoul moaned, picking up speed as it got closer to him. Its eyes were vacant, dead, and its mouth hung open, revealing broken teeth. The skin was gray and mottled, hanging loose in places. One arm dangled at an unnatural angle, broken at some point and never healed. The smell hit Grant like a wall, the stench of rot and decay making his stomach turn. He could hear his heart pounding in his ears, drowning out everything else. Grant let out a yell as he raised his weapon and fired. One bullet cracked through the forehead, blowing out the back of its skull and dropping it on the wooden planks. The sound echoed across the water, and the body crumpled in a heap. Both Miles and Skylar let out a mocking cheer as they got up onto the docks, rushing over to their man. They clapped him on the shoulders, their laughter carrying across the water. "There you go, boy. See how easy that was?" Miles asked. "Yeah, that wasn't hard at all," Grant said. His voice was steady now, the adrenaline pushing away the fear. Miles smacked him on the back as Skylar walked over to the body, kicking it over the edge and into the water. The corpse splashed and sank beneath the surface. Landry and Ace stayed quiet as they walked over to them, ignoring the trio and instead focusing on the area leading to the parking lot. Both of them had their hands on their assault rifles, ready to pull them up at a moment's notice. Their eyes scanned the shadows, looking for any movement. "Oh, relax, there's nothing over here we can't handle," Miles said. "If you want to be lazy, you go right ahead," Landry said. Miles wasn't thrilled with the way Landry was speaking to him, but shook it off and started laughing, motioning for him to take point. The gesture was dismissive, condescending. "All right, big man, why don't you show us how it's done?" Miles asked. Landry and Ace pushed through them, raising their rifles as they moved towards the wooden structure that separated the docks from the parking lot. They moved with the efficiency of men who had done this dozens of times before, covering each other's angles. Their boots made soft thuds on the wooden planks, and they kept their breathing steady and controlled. They came around the corner, moving swiftly to clear the area. The parking lot stretched out before them, a collection of abandoned vehicles sitting in various states of disrepair. Glass crunched under their feet where windows had been broken out. "I'm clear," Ace said. "Same here," Landry said. The two men relaxed as they walked over to a truck, Landry opening the driver's side door with Ace riding shotgun. The interior was dusty but intact. Landry checked the visor for keys, finding them right where he expected. "I can drive," Miles said. "I'm sure you can, but you're not." "Get in the back," Landry said. Landry spoke just forcefully enough to Miles to get him to comply. The challenge hung in the air for a moment, and Landry could see Miles weighing his options. Rather than fight him on it, Miles smirked, looking back to the others and motioning for them to get into the truck bed. "Come on, we don't have all day," Miles said. As soon as they were situated in the back, Landry started up the truck, throwing it into gear and pulling out, driving towards the nearest liquor store just a couple miles away. The engine rumbled to life, and they rolled out of the parking lot. The streets were empty except for the occasional abandoned vehicle and scattered debris. Papers blew across the road, and a shopping cart lay on its side in the middle of an intersection. The two men kept their mouths shut, putting their full focus on the task at hand. Landry's hands gripped the wheel tightly, his eyes constantly scanning the road ahead. He checked every alley, every doorway, looking for any sign of movement. Ace watched the sides, his finger resting near the trigger guard of his rifle. Behind them, they could hear Miles and the others talking and laughing, oblivious to the danger that could be lurking around any corner. Chapter 4. Landry drove the group down the street, headed towards a nearby business district. The first part of their journey was uneventful, as it was the back road leading to the community. The houses gave way to empty lots and then to commercial buildings, their windows dark and lifeless. A few cars sat abandoned on the side of the road, doors hanging open where people had fled in panic. Papers and debris scattered across the pavement, lifted by the occasional breeze. As they approached the scorched intersection from the propane tank explosion during their first excursion out, they stopped. "Which one are we hitting?" Ace asked. "The place by the supercenter is the closest," Landry said. "Do you really want to go to the supercenter?" Ace asked. "Not really, but the next closest one is another mile away," Landry said. As they debated, Miles rapped his knuckles on the back window. The sound was sharp and insistent. "What's the holdup?" Miles asked. "Just figuring out our best option," Ace said. "The boss likes the pricey stuff, and the one by the supercenter has the best selection. That's where we need to go," Miles said. Landry and Ace glanced at each other, knowing it was a bad idea. The supercenter had been a hotspot since the beginning, a place where people had flocked thinking they'd find safety and supplies. Instead, they'd found death. Regardless, Landry hit the gas hard. causing Miles to fall backwards into the bed as he made the turn. The duo in the cab let out a chuckle as they could hear Miles cursing as the others helped him back up. It was a small victory, but they'd take what they could get. Landry drove towards the supercenter, keeping a brisk pace as the engine noise drew the attention of zombies in the area. They looked around, spotting dozens of them, shambling out of buildings and from behind cars abandoned in lots. Some emerged from doorways, others from alleys between structures. The creatures turned their heads at the sound of the truck, their vacant eyes locking onto the vehicle. A woman in a torn business suit stumbled out of a fast food restaurant. A man in coveralls dragged himself from behind a delivery truck, one leg twisted at an impossible angle. They all moved with the same purpose now, converging on the sound of the engine. Despite the number of ghouls, they posed no threat to the group as they moved swiftly towards their destination. The truck was faster than the shambling creatures, easily outpacing them. As the truck approached the liquor store, a couple blocks up, Landry let off the gas, allowing the truck to coast the rest of the way towards the building, minimizing the engine noise. The truck rolled forward silently, only the crunch of debris under the tires giving away their position. Landry began to apply the brakes as they got closer to the liquor store, which was a standalone building in the parking lot of a strip mall. The structure was small, probably no more than 1,500 square feet. At the far end of the lot, hundreds of yards away, sat the supercenter, which had the majority of creatures. The massive store loomed in the distance, its parking lot filled with abandoned vehicles and wandering ghouls. It was hard to tell how many there were given the distance, but it was easily in the hundreds. The numbers dwindled as it got closer to the liquor store. However, there were still a couple of dozen within 20 yards of the building. They moved in their slow, methodical way, stumbling over curbs and bumping into cars. "How do you want to do it?" Ace asked. "They're spread out pretty thin. With 5 of us, we should be able to take them down quietly," Landry said. "Sounds like a lot of work, but I'm in," Ace said. Ace turned to relay the message to the trio in the back, only to see them jumping over the side. His stomach dropped. "Oh shit," Ace said. Landry began to ask what Ace was referring to, but saw it for himself as Miles raced by his window, assault rifle at the ready. The man moved with purpose, his boots pounding on the pavement. Before he could say anything, the trio from the back opened fire. Bullets flew towards the zombies by the liquor store. The creatures staggered a bit as the projectiles slammed into their torsos. The sound of gunfire echoed across the parking lot, sharp cracks that rang out like thunder. Every now and then one shot would find its mark, hitting the head and dropping them. Bodies crumpled to the ground, but most of the rounds were wasted on torso shots that did nothing. Miles was spraying bullets wildly, his assault rifle spitting lead without any real aim. Skylar was doing better, her shots more controlled, but still far from ideal. Grant was the worst of the 3, flinching with each shot and pulling his aim off target. "Jesus Christ, he's a moron," Ace said. Landry looked around the strip mall, watching as every zombie turned and began shambling towards them, drawn to the gunfire. The creatures that had been wandering aimlessly now had a purpose, a target. He then looked in his rearview mirror, spotting dozens more coming at them from across the street. The horde by the strip mall was concerning, but the rear group would be to them far sooner. They were closer, moving with the relentless determination that defined the undead. "Get in there and get what we need," Landry said. "Are you crazy?" Ace asked. "Just do it, I'm going to buy us some time," Landry said. Ace muttered curses under his breath as he threw open the truck door, slamming it behind him as he raised his rifle and began pushing towards the liquor store, putting down ghouls as he went. His shots were controlled, measured. Each one found its mark, dropping zombies with single headshots. Landry waited until his partner was clear of the vehicle before throwing it into reverse, cutting the wheel sharply so that he was facing the horde coming at them from across the street. The truck lurched backwards, tires squealing. Landry revved the engine for a moment before slamming on the gas. The back tire spun for a second before catching traction, lurching forward. He picked up as much speed as he could, racing towards the mob of ghouls which were tightly packed together. The speedometer climbed as the truck accelerated, the engine roaring. At the last possible second, Landry slammed on the brakes, cutting the wheel hard to the left, which caused the rear end of the truck to spin around in a 180. The vehicle shuddered as the bed slammed into the edge of the mob, sending bodies flying through the air. The impact was violent, the sound of metal hitting flesh echoing across the street. The truck rocked on its suspension from the force of the collision. Bones cracked as the creatures landed on top of others, creating a pile of writhing zombies. Arms and legs twisted at unnatural angles, and the moans intensified as the ghouls tried to right themselves. Some of them were still moving despite broken spines and shattered limbs. A few of the ghouls were still standing, but the move had diminished their numbers significantly, at least in the short term. The ones that remained standing stumbled over the pile of their fallen companions. Landry hit the gas, speeding back across the street, jumping the curb into the parking lot of the liquor store. The truck bounced hard, the suspension bottoming out before recovering. He veered hard to the left, where a pack of a dozen zombies were getting close to the entrance. Miles and the others were still firing wildly, bullets flying in every direction. Landry repeated the same maneuver, slamming on the brakes at the last possible second, cutting the wheel and using the back end as a battering ram. This time, he was less successful, only managing to take down half the ghouls. The others stumbled but remained upright, turning towards the truck with renewed interest. He hit the gas, lurching forward before stopping. Landry yanked his sidearm free, firing out of the window, putting down the still-standing creatures in a matter of seconds. Each shot was precise, deliberate. The bodies dropped one after another until the area was clear. "Landry!" Ace called out. Ace's voice carried from the entrance of the liquor store, reaching the truck. Landry looked over, seeing his partner waving frantically for him to get over there. He didn't hesitate, throwing the truck into reverse and backing it up to the entrance. The truck rolled backwards, stopping just feet from the door. Within seconds of slamming on the brakes, Ace and the others began throwing boxes of liquor into the back. The boxes landed with heavy thuds, glass bottles clinking against each other. Miles was grabbing anything he could reach, not bothering to check labels or prices. Skylar was more selective, tossing the expensive bottles first. Grant was struggling with a heavy case, nearly dropping it before Ace helped him swing it into the bed. Landry looked to the side of the building, which was just a few yards away. Zombies began coming around the side, drawn to the commotion. More and more appeared, a steady stream of undead flesh. They moved with purpose, their arms outstretched and mouths hanging open. Landry threw open the driver's side door, readying his rifle. He got the first zombie in his sights, squeezing the trigger and putting it down. The creature's head snapped back, and it collapsed in a heap. He continued his assault, ending the unlife of every creature that shambled around the corner of the building. His movements were mechanical, efficient. Aim, fire, move to the next target. The pile of bodies grew. After what felt like an eternity, which in reality was barely a minute, Ace let out a two-finger whistle. The shrill sound cut through the chaos. "Get us the hell out of here, Landry!" Ace called out. Landry didn't waste time, rushing back to the truck. He threw his weapon to Ace through the open door as he slid in behind the wheel. His hands found the key, turning it as Ace caught the rifle. In a flash, the truck was put into drive. The gas hit, the rear tires spinning before catching grip. They lurched forward, bouncing down onto the street as they flew off the curb. The truck landed hard, the frame groaning under the impact. Landry cut the wheel sharply to the right, speeding back the way they came. In the bed of the truck, Miles and the others were scrambling to hold onto the boxes and each other as Landry pushed the vehicle to its limits. The truck fishtailed slightly as it accelerated, the rear end sliding before the tires found purchase. It took a minute of driving before they were safely away from the business district. The buildings fell behind them, replaced by residential neighborhoods. The sounds of moaning faded into the distance, becoming nothing more than a distant memory. Behind them, the horde continued to shamble towards where they had been, but the truck was long gone. "Are you good, man?" Ace asked. Landry didn't respond, instead focusing on both the road and tamping down his simmering rage. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, the vein in his temple pulsed. "I said, are you good, Landry?" Ace asked. Landry didn't respond verbally, simply looking over to his partner, giving him a subtle nod. Ace could see the anger behind his leader's eyes, deciding to not push the issue any further. He'd seen that look before, and he knew better than to poke the bear. Chapter 5. Landry drove them down the street for another mile, through a relatively uninhabited area. only a few small businesses and houses dotting the roadside. There were some zombies roaming about, but none that were close enough to pose a threat. Most of them were far enough away that they barely registered the truck passing by. A lone ghoul stood in the middle of an empty parking lot, its head turning slowly to track the sound of the engine. Another one stumbled along the sidewalk, dragging one leg behind it. As they reached the next intersection, Miles knocked on the back window, getting Landry's attention. The sound was sharp, demanding. "Hey man, do you know where you're going?" Miles asked. Landry didn't respond, only continuing to drive straight. His eyes remained fixed on the road ahead. As he pushed through an intersection, Miles yelled out, "You missed the turn, dumbass," Miles said. Landry slammed on the brakes, nearly sending Miles tumbling over the top of the truck. The vehicle lurched to a stop, tires screeching on the pavement. As the vehicle came to a complete stop, Landry threw the door open, getting out. His boots hit the asphalt hard, the sound echoing down the empty street. "Oh shit," Ace said. Ace threw his door open, scrambling out, trying to get to Landry before he did something that couldn't be undone. He'd seen his partner angry before, but this was different. This was dangerous. Miles jumped down from the back of the truck, getting chest to chest with Landry, entering into a bit of a standoff. The two men were evenly matched in size, their faces inches apart. Neither one blinked. Landry could smell the sweat and gunpowder on Miles, could see the vein pulsing in his neck. The older man's breath was hot and sour. Behind them, Skylar and Grant had climbed out of the truck bed, watching the confrontation with interest. "You got a problem?" Miles asked. "Yeah, I do. Your stupidity nearly got us killed back there," Landry said. "We're still standing just fine. Those things didn't come close to touching us," Miles said. "Yeah, because I risked our only mode of transportation to hold them at bay," Landry said. Miles let out a dismissive laugh as he stepped back from Landry. He waved his hand in the air like he was swatting away a fly. "We would have been just fine, even if you hadn't have overreacted," Miles said. "We need to get something straight right now. I'm in charge of this operation. You're going to fall in line, or else we're going to have a problem," Landry said. Miles again let out a chuckle before speaking. The sound was cold, calculated. "The only problem out here is the one Sammy has with you and your friend there," Miles said. Landry glanced over to Ace, who was clearly worried. His partner's face had gone pale, and his hand had moved closer to his sidearm without him even realizing it. "Oh yeah, you don't think Sammy is stupid, do you? Make no mistake, he's got his eyes on you," Miles said. The duo didn't like the tone in Miles's voice. Numerous thoughts ran through Landry's head all at once. What did Sammy know? Was their house bugged? Was Brody trying to set them up this morning? Had someone overheard their conversation on the deck? The possibilities swirled in his mind, each one worse than the last. His paranoia was cut short as the sounds of moaning reached their ears. The group looked around, spotting zombies coming around from the backs of buildings, drawn to their presence. There were at least a dozen of them, maybe more, shambling out from alleys and doorways. Their movements were slow but relentless. One of them was missing an arm, the stump dragging along its side. Another had its jaw hanging at an odd angle, barely attached. They all moved with the same singular purpose, drawn to the noise and the presence of the living. "Guys, what do you say we put a pin in this and get moving?" Ace asked. "Yeah, Landry, why don't you get back behind the wheel and chauffeur me around the city? You can start by turning around and making the turn there," Miles said. Miles stared Landry down, who didn't react. The two men stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. The zombies were getting closer, their moans growing louder. "Or, would you rather I drive since I know where I'm going?" Miles asked. Landry cleared his throat, doing his best to regain the high ground between them. He couldn't let Miles see that he'd gotten to him. "Just get in the back. I'll have us there in no time," Landry said. Miles smirked, patting Landry on the shoulder in an unnerving manner. The gesture was condescending, a power play. "That's what I thought," Miles said. Miles stepped to the back of the truck, using the bumper to get himself up into the bed. He moved slowly, deliberately, making a show of it. Landry and Ace slipped back into the cab, both of them shaken up by the conversation. The doors closed with heavy thuds. As they got going, the duo in the cab kept their views forward. However, Landry occasionally glanced in the rearview mirror, waiting until Miles and the others were seated away from the back window before speaking in low tones. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Ace, don't look over to me, but listen up," Landry said. "What's up, Landry?" Ace asked. "I need you to keep an eye on them in the back. Just use the mirrors, glances only. I don't want them to think that we're rattled," Landry said. "But we are rattled, aren't we?" Ace asked. "Sammy has always been big on loyalty, and I have to imagine that the longer this goes on, the more he's going to lean on those he trusts. Miles might be trying to mess with us, but," Landry said. Landry trailed off, leaving it for Ace to finish. The unspoken words hung in the air between them. "But he also might be telling the truth," Ace said, "which is why I want you to keep an eye on them, especially as we get closer to this food shop. Miles isn't the most capable person out there, but," Landry said. Landry again trailed off, letting Ace pick it up. His partner understood what he was getting at. "But I'm pretty sure he could drive the truck back to the docks," Ace said. "Yep, my thoughts exactly," Landry said. Ace gave a subtle nod as Landry made the next turn, leading them into a neighborhood. He kept the speed slow, as there were a handful of zombies roaming about. The creatures turned at the sound of the engine, their heads swiveling in unison. As they drove, he looked at the houses, just trying to get a sense of the situation. Most of the houses sat quiet, cars still in the driveways, no movement coming from within. He knew that in most cases, it meant the residents didn't make it past the first few hours of the apocalypse. The thought was sobering. Behind every door was a story that ended badly. Families that had barricaded themselves in, hoping for rescue that never came. People who had turned on each other when supplies ran low. Children who had watched their parents change into monsters. On the right, in a large 2-story house, Landry caught the glimpse of a light being turned on and off. He stopped in front of the house, where half a dozen zombies were pressed up against the front. The creatures clawed at the door and windows, leaving smears of dark fluid on the glass. Their fingernails scraped against the wood siding, leaving deep gouges. He looked up to the second-floor window, spotting 2 people waving the flashlight at him. As soon as they realized that they'd been spotted, they lowered the light and waved frantically with their hands. Their movements were desperate, pleading. Even from this distance, Landry could see the fear on their faces. One of them looked young, maybe a teenager. The other was older, possibly a parent. They were trapped up there, probably had been for days or even weeks. "So, what do you want to do?" Ace asked. Before Landry could answer, the duo inside the cab flinched as a series of gunshots went off from the back of the truck. The sound was deafening, making their ears ring. They looked over to the house where bullets peppered the second story around the window. Wood splintered and siding cracked under the impacts. One bullet shattered the glass. Luckily, the people inside had taken cover. The flashlight clattered to the floor, its beam visible through the broken window. Shards of glass fell to the ground below, glittering in the sunlight. Landry turned his head to the back of the truck, spotting Miles lowering his weapon, the trio in the bed laughing hysterically. Their laughter was harsh, cruel. Miles was slapping his knee, his face red from laughing so hard. Skylar had her hand over her mouth, trying to contain herself. Grant looked uncomfortable for a moment, but then joined in when Miles looked at him. "Oh my God, did you see the look on their faces? I'm pretty sure they shit themselves," Miles said. "So, that's what that smell is?" Skylar asked. The 3 of them continued descending into laughter. Grant was doubled over, holding his sides. Skylar was wiping tears from her eyes. Miles looked like he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. "As if we'd waste our precious time on a bunch of losers who couldn't even get out of their own house," Miles said. "Yeah, we're out here enjoying a sunny day out, and they're too scared to even open the window," Grant said. The trio continued laughing before Miles noticed Landry was staring at him. The laughter died down slowly, replaced by a tense silence. "What's your problem?" Miles asked. Landry knew what he really wanted to say, but pushed it to the side in order to stay on mission. He bit back the words that threatened to spill out, the rage that wanted to take control. "My problem is that you're wasting ammunition. If that fancy food store is anything like the liquor store, then we're going to need every bullet," Landry said. "Relax, big man. We have plenty of bullets to go around," Miles said. Miles used his hand to mimic a gun firing towards Landry, letting out a laugh after doing so. He cocked his thumb like a hammer and pretended to fire twice. The gesture was juvenile, mocking. "Come on, man, we gotta keep moving," Ace said. Ace pointed to zombies in nearby yards that were shambling towards them. The gunfire had drawn more of them, and they were converging on the truck from multiple directions. Some came from between houses, others from across the street. "Everybody get comfortable back there. We're pushing on to the food store." Chapter 6. It took a few minutes of driving for them to pull out of the neighborhood, stopping at the intersection across from the boutique food store. The building sat on a corner lot, easily visible from their position. The storefront had large windows with gold lettering that had once advertised its wares to wealthy clientele. A few zombies wandered in the parking lot, their movements slow and aimless. Landry studied the scene in front of them. As Ace motioned for Miles to get closer to the truck window, Miles leaned forward, his elbows resting on the roof of the cab. His shadow fell across Landry's shoulder. "How about this time you wait for the plan before you go popping off?" Ace asked. Miles smirked, clearly not impressed by Ace. He waved his hand dismissively. "Yeah, fine, whatever. Just make it quick. The boss promised me a few of these bottles and I'm ready to call it a day," Miles said. Ace turned back to front, rolling his eyes at the lack of seriousness coming from Miles. He joined Landry in looking at their target. The two men studied the building in silence for a moment, both of them calculating angles and distances, looking for potential problems. The building stood alone in a small lot, with a dozen zombies scattered about. The front door of the building was shut, but they could see movement inside the store through the large display window. Shapes moved back and forth behind the glass, their forms distorted by the reflections. The creatures in the lot were spread out, some near the entrance, others wandering near the edges of the property. A few were clustered together near an overturned shopping cart, drawn to it for reasons only they understood. Their clothes were torn and stained, and even from this distance Landry could see the telltale signs of decay on their exposed skin. "How do you want to handle it?" Ace asked. Landry contemplated for another few moments before speaking loudly enough for them to hear in the back. He wanted to make sure everyone understood the plan this time. "We're going in quiet, taking down those things in the lot with knives," Landry said. "Oh, come on, Landry, don't be a pussy. We have big-ass guns, let's use them," Miles said. Landry turned and stared Miles down. While Miles had little to no respect for him, he could sense that Landry wasn't to be debated at the moment. The look in his eyes was dangerous, final. "Yeah, fine, whatever you want, team leader," Miles said. Miles spoke with sarcasm in his voice, giving a mocking salute. The gesture was exaggerated, childish. "Ace, I want you focused on the door. We'll take care of the parking lot. Once you get it open, get inside and call out what you see. I'll be there to assist," Landry said. "And I'll be right behind. Skylar and Grant can handle the lot," Miles said. Landry turned and looked at Skylar and Grant, speaking forcefully. He needed them to understand how important this was. "Once we secure the lot, I want you to keep watch. There doesn't seem to be much activity up here, but that can change in an instant," Landry said. "Don't worry, we'll let you know if anything is coming our way," Skylar said. Skylar was a little more respectful of Landry, speaking confidently and on mission. He gave her a nod before turning back to front, gripping the wheel. At least one of Miles's people seemed to have some sense. "Once we're inside, grab everything you can. I want to be in and out in under 5, Landry said. "We have to make sure to get caviar. That's the boss's favorite," Miles said. "If you have a shopping list, have at it. I'm grabbing everything I can," Ace said. Miles began to clap back at Ace, but Landry cut him off. He was done with the bickering. "Can it, both of you? Let's get this done and back home," Landry said. Ace and Miles muttered to themselves as Landry hit the gas, the truck picking up speed quickly. The engine roared as they accelerated. He got them across the street and into the parking lot, slamming on the brakes right in front of the store. The truck skidded to a stop, tires screeching. Miles jumped down from the truck bed first, lowering his shoulder and slamming it into a smaller creature, knocking it to the ground. The zombie hit the pavement hard, its arms flailing. He planted his foot on its chest, pinning it down while he casually drew his knife, driving it into its forehead. The blade punched through the skull with a sickening crunch. Miles twisted the knife before pulling it free, dark fluid coating the steel. Skylar and Grant climbed over the back tailgate, getting to the ground and focusing their attention on a couple of zombies shambling towards them. Skylar was ready for battle, while the young man was hesitant. His hands shook as he gripped his knife. He'd done this before, but the fear hadn't left him yet. Maybe it never would. "You know what to do, so get it done," Skylar said. Skylar used her free hand to shove Grant forward, the young man raising the knife high above his head as he ran towards his creature. He let out a primal scream as he grabbed it by the shirt to steady it while stabbing downwards. The sound was raw, desperate. The tip of the knife cracked the top of the skull, the ghoul falling limp to the ground, yanking the weapon free from his hand. Grant panicked, dropping to his knees to try and pull it out, unaware of the other zombie closing in on him. He tugged at the handle, but it was wedged in tight. The bone had clamped down on the blade, holding it fast. Behind him, the second zombie was only a few feet away, its arms outstretched and mouth hanging open. Skylar let out a yell as she approached, trying to keep the zombie's attention on her and not her inexperienced partner. The ploy worked as the zombie looked over to her, receiving a knife to the eye for its trouble. The blade sank deep, and the creature went still. She put her boot on its chest and kicked it backwards, sending it sprawling to the ground. She yanked the blade free before turning her gaze down to Grant, speaking in a forceful tone. Her face was hard, no nonsense. "Don't ever leave your feet. You have other weapons, so if you lose one, move on. We can always get it later," Skylar said. Skylar grabbed him by the arm, yanking him to his feet, staring at him as he freed his weapon. He was rattled, but gave her a nod. His breathing was fast, adrenaline pumping through his system. She smacked him on the shoulder, pointing out their next targets. "Come on, show me what you got," Skylar said. As the two of them rushed off to continue the fight, Landry was by the door, stabbing a zombie in the side of the head, keeping the area clear for Ace to get the door open. The creature dropped at his feet, joining two others he'd already put down. Their bodies lay in a pile by the entrance, a barrier of flesh and bone. He kicked one of them aside to make room, keeping his eyes on the parking lot for any more threats. "How much longer?" Landry asked. Ace was using his knife to jimmy open the lock, cursing under his breath as he worked. The blade scraped against the metal mechanism inside the doorframe. "Come on, man, how much longer?" Landry asked. Ace gave it one more smack, freeing the door from the frame. He glanced up to Landry, giving him a wink as he got to his feet, readying his blade for battle, his hand wrapped around the handle of his knife, prepared for whatever was inside. Landry turned to follow his partner into the building. With a silent countdown, they pushed inside and were immediately greeted by a zombie reaching out for them from the side. The creature's hands shot out, grasping. It had been waiting just inside the door, probably drawn to the sound of Ace working the lock. The ghoul got its hands on Ace, who was first through the door. The zombie barely managed to take a step towards its prey, however, as Landry drove his knife into its face. He held it firm as Ace shoved it back to the ground. The body hit the floor with a heavy thud. Its head bounced once on the tile before going still. "Thanks, Landry," Ace said. "I'll be damned if you're going to leave me alone with those three," Landry said. Ace let out a chuckle as the two of them pushed through the store, which was relatively small, filled with wooden display tables throughout the middle of the floor. On one side of the room was a line of refrigerators, which sounded like they were still working. The store smelled like a mix of aged cheese and cured meats, expensive scents that seemed out of place in the apocalypse. Display cases near the counter held artisanal breads that had long since gone stale, and bottles of wine lined the walls and custom wooden racks. The duo pushed through the store, Landry jumping over the counter before pausing at the storeroom door. He gave it a knock, listening for any sound coming from within, relieved when he heard nothing. To be safe, he pushed it open, giving the small storage area a quick sweep. Shelves lined the walls, boxes stacked neatly on each one. Some had been opened, suggesting someone had been in here before, but there was no one now. No bodies, no zombies, just supplies waiting to be taken. "We're clear," Landry said. As if on cue, Miles came through the door, yelling out. His voice echoed through the small space. "The parking lot is clear," Miles said. "Then we better get shopping then," Ace said. The trio grabbed handheld shopping baskets and began filling them with high-end gourmet food. Duck confit, canned oysters, and the caviar that Miles was so interested in. They moved quickly through the aisles, pulling items off shelves and tossing them into baskets. Miles was grabbing bottles of oil and vinegar, expensive imports with fancy labels, truffle oil, aged balsamic that probably cost more per bottle than most people made in a week. Ace was focused on canned goods, anything that would last. Smoked salmon, pâtés, preserved fruits. Landry was doing the same, working methodically through the store. He grabbed jars of olives, tins of sardines, packages of crackers that were still sealed. The baskets grew heavy quickly, the weight of luxury items that most people would never taste in their lifetimes. "Jackpot," Miles said. He was standing in front of a refrigerated case, his face pressed against the glass like a kid in a candy store. Inside were rows of small tins, each one labeled with prices that seemed absurd in the old world. In this new one, they were meaningless. "You better take it all, because I don't want to come back here," Landry said. "Don't worry, I'm grabbing everything," Miles said. He opened the case and began scooping tins into his basket, not bothering to close the door behind him. The cold air spilled out, mixing with the warm air of the store. The trio continued loading up on high-dollar food for a couple of minutes, stopping only when Skylar stuck her head back through the door. Her face was flushed, and there was urgency in her eyes. "You better get out here. We have company." Chapter 7. Landry, Ace, and Miles dropped the food they had been collecting and raced to the door, weapons at the ready. Baskets clattered to the floor, expensive items spilling across the tile. Jars rolled under shelves, and bottles clinked together. As they got through the door, taking cover behind the truck where Skylar and Grant were hiding, they could hear the roar of an engine in the distance. The sound was getting closer, growing louder with each passing second. "Is somebody driving towards us?" Ace asked. A split second later, they saw a pickup truck slowing down at the intersection just across from them. As it turned back towards the neighborhood they had just come through, they noticed that the back was loaded up with goods. Boxes and bags were stacked high in the bed, secured with rope. Miles began to pop up from cover, aiming his weapon at the truck, only to have Landry grab him and pull him back down. His finger was already on the trigger. "Get your damn hands off of me," Miles said. Miles shook Landry off, standing tall and staring at him with contempt. He acted like he was about to aim his gun at Landry, but thought better of it and relaxed. His jaw clenched as he lowered the rifle slightly. "What in the hell are you trying to do? Get us into a firefight?" Landry asked. "If that's what it takes, that's our stuff they have in the back of that truck," Miles said. Landry stared at Miles in disbelief for a moment before shaking his head. The man was insane. "Jesus, man, there's more than enough to go around for everybody," Ace said. Miles got a wild look in his eyes as he turned to Ace, speaking like the people in the truck had personally offended him simply by existing. His face flushed red with anger. "Sammy made it clear to me, everything we can drive to is rightfully his, which means we're going to go after them and take what is ours," Miles said. "No, we're not. We're going to load up and get back home," Landry said. "If that's the way you want to play it, Landry, we can. But just know that I'm going to be forced to tell him that you were sympathizing with people who were stealing from him," Miles said. Landry glanced over to Ace, who gave him a subtle shake of the head, trying his best to convince him to stand down. Much to Ace's relief, Landry relented. The weight of Miles' threat hung heavy in the air. "Fine, but grab the stuff from the store, because we might not be able to make it back for a while," Landry said. Miles smirked, knowing he had the upper hand as they rushed back inside to collect their bounty before loading up and driving into the neighborhood. The baskets were gathered quickly, their contents dumped into the truck bed alongside the liquor boxes. "Pick up the pace, we need to track them down," Miles said. Landry accelerated a little more, keeping his head on a swivel looking for the other truck. His eyes scanned every side street, every driveway. As he made the next turn, retracing their steps, he spotted the truck parked outside of the house that Miles had taken some shots at. The broken window was still visible from the street. "There they are! Let's go! Let's go!" Miles said. Miles smacked his hand on the roof of the truck, getting Landry to pick up the pace. They sped down the street, skidding to a halt 15 yards away from the truck. The tires squealed as they came to a stop. Standing in the yard, just a few yards from their vehicle, stood two people. The woman was athletic-looking, with a metal softball bat resting on her shoulder. The other was young and Hispanic, who appeared to have chains wrapped around his fists. Both of them stood their ground, watching the newcomers with wary eyes. Neither of them looked scared, just ready. They'd clearly been in situations like this before. Landry was the first out of the truck, turning to stop Miles in his tracks as he landed on the ground. He put his hand on Miles's chest, holding him back. "You're going to let me do the talking," Landry said. Miles began to protest, but Landry stared him down. The look in his eyes left no room for argument. "Yeah, whatever. Get to it then," Miles said. Miles turned back to Grant, who was still in the back of the truck as he was waiting for Skylar to climb down first. The young man looked nervous, his hands gripping his rifle tightly. "Grant, stay in the truck bed. Keep watch," Miles said. The young man didn't protest, simply nodding as he raised his rifle and began pointing it down the street. His head swiveled back and forth, scanning for threats. Ace stayed on his side of the truck, keeping watch down the other side of the street, while keeping an eye on the trio as they approached the newcomers. Landry, Miles, and Skylar spread out, a couple of yards between them as they walked in a line. They stopped a couple of yards away from the others, who stood their ground. The tension was thick, the air heavy with the possibility of violence. "Afternoon, it's a fine day to be out and about, isn't it?" Landry asked. The duo didn't speak. Instead, the man gave a slight nod, both of them clearly on edge as three people with guns stood in front of them. The woman's grip tightened on her bat. "My name is Landry. Who do I have the pleasure of speaking to?" Landry asked. "My name is Santiago, and this is my friend Naomi," Santiago said. "Santiago, it's nice to meet you. If you don't mind me asking, what are you doing here?" Landry asked. "The same as you, helping those who cannot help themselves," Santiago said. Miles let out a big belly laugh, drawing the attention of everyone. The sound was harsh, mocking. "Oh, this guy is too much. Helping people," Miles said. "Pardon me, but I do not understand what is so funny," Santiago said. Miles stopped laughing as he raised his weapon, aiming it towards Naomi, prompting Skylar to do the same, only aiming it at Santiago. Both of them had their fingers on the triggers. "Miles, Skylar, calm down," Landry said. "Enough talk, Landry. This is Sammy's region, and you've stolen what belongs to him. And now you have to pay," Miles said. Before either of them could fire, a gunshot cracked off from across the street. The trio flinched, looking around to see where it came from. A second later, they heard Grant fall to his knees in the back of the truck, his gun clattering on the metal. The sound was loud, unmistakable. They watched in horror as another shot cracked, causing the front part of Grant's head to explode, sending him falling over the side of the truck to the ground. His body hit the pavement with a sickening thud. "Grant!" Skylar said. Skylar turned towards the houses across the street, firing wildly. Her rifle spat bullets in no particular direction, just spraying lead towards the houses. Miles initially aimed in the same direction, only to turn back towards Santiago and Naomi. Before he could find a target, however, his face met the business end of the softball bat. Naomi had flung the bat from distance, the makeshift weapon hitting the grass right alongside the now dazed gunman. Miles staggered backwards, his nose broken and bleeding. Santiago didn't waste the opportunity, darting forward towards Skylar, who noticed him at the last possible second. She spun around, trying to target him, only to have him use one hand to push the rifle away, and the other chain-wrapped fist digging into her gut. Every ounce of air was forced from her lungs as she dropped to the ground. She gasped, trying to breathe, her face turning red. Landry rushed over to Naomi, slinging the rifle over his shoulder as he reached out for her arm. She tried to throw a punch, but he ducked under it, coming around behind her while drawing his handgun, planting it in her ribs. His movements were quick, efficient. "Okay, I'm going to need everybody to calm down now. Just be cool and we'll be on our way," Landry said. "You ride up on us threatening to kill us, and you think you're just going to ride off like nothing happened?" Naomi asked. "That's exactly what I think is going to happen. Now, is that your person across the street?" Landry asked. "No clue, but they clearly don't like you," Naomi said. "That's understandable. Now forgive me because I'm about to yell in your ear," Landry said. Landry stayed hidden behind Naomi as he yelled out to the house across the street, his voice carried across the yards, echoing off the houses. "To whoever is shooting at us, if you want to see these two survive the next 2 minutes, you need to drop your gun out of the window. We're going to collect our people and leave. You have 10 seconds before I open fire. 9, 8, 7, Landry said. Landry trailed off as he saw a gun being dropped from the second floor of the house directly across from them. The weapon tumbled through the air before landing in the grass below with a soft thump. "Ace, Come help Skylar get Miles back to the truck, Landry said. Ace slung his rifle over his shoulder, rushing over to help a still-winded Skylar pick the nearly unconscious Miles up off the ground. Miles groaned as they lifted him, blood streaming from his nose and mouth. They half carried, half dragged him back towards the truck. Landry stood his ground, keeping the gun planted in Naomi's ribs. However, he lightened up on the pressure. He stayed there until the others were back at the truck, out of earshot. He began whispering to Naomi. His voice was low, urgent. I'm going to need you to keep your voice down when you respond to me, Landry said. What are you talking about? Naomi asked. Do you understand? Landry asked. Yeah, sure, Naomi said. Are you working with Connor? Landry asked. Naomi looked over to Santiago, who gave a half-hearted shrug in response, unsure of what to do. The question had caught them both off guard. Maybe we are, maybe we aren't. What do you care? Naomi asked. I'm going to assume that you are. My name is Landry, and he owes me one. Tell him that things with Sammy are starting to get out of hand, and I'm going to need help soon, Landry said. Sammy Torino? You work for Sammy Torino? Naomi asked. Not like that asshole you knocked out. Like I said, we're going to need help. Tell your people to be on high alert, because after this little incident, I don't know what's going to happen next. Do you understand? Landry said. Yeah, I got it, Naomi said. Good, now I'm going to get out of here. Take care of these people, Landry said. Landry let Naomi go, allowing her to turn around to face him as he moved back over to the truck. He kept his gun lowered but ready, watching them as he backed away. He quickly slipped behind the wheel, starting it up and driving away at a high speed. Within seconds, he vanished around the next corner. The truck's engine roared as it disappeared from view. Santiago and Naomi stood there for a moment, bewildered. They looked at each other, then at Grant's body lying in the street, then at the house across the way. So what do we do now? Naomi asked. We make a call to Connor and tell him what just happened. Chapter 8. The ride back to the docks was a silent one, as Ace joined Skylar in the back of the truck, keeping an eye on Miles, who was still groggy after the bat attack. Skylar was still having trouble breathing after the gut punch from Santiago. She sat hunched over, one arm wrapped around her midsection. Every bump in the road caused her to wince, her face contorting with pain. Miles leaned against the side of the truck bed, his eyes barely open, blood dried on his face. The crimson had crusted around his nose and mouth, making him look worse than he probably was. Grant's body lay wrapped in a tarp near the tailgate, a grim reminder of how badly things had gone. Landry made the final turn to the docks, spotting a couple of zombies in the lot. He knocked on the back window, getting Ace's attention, his knuckles rapped against the glass twice, sharp and insistent. Put them down quick, Landry said. Ace nodded and got his rifle ready, crouching by the back of the cab. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking the chamber and flipping off the safety. As soon as Landry stopped the truck, Ace popped up and took aim. The first zombie was maybe 20 yards away, shambling towards them with its arms outstretched. With 2 squeezes of the trigger, he put down both creatures. The shots echoed across the water, and the bodies dropped like puppets with their strings cut. We're clear, Ace said. Landry got out of the truck, helping Skylar down from the rear bumper. She winced as she stepped, her face pale and drawn. Easy now, you're okay, Landry said. If I ever see that son of a bitch again, I'm shooting him on sight, Skylar said. She spoke forcefully, causing herself more pain as she did. Her hand pressed harder against her stomach. You might want to give it a day or two before you go looking for that fight, Landry said. Skylar let out some curses, shaking her head as she walked towards the docks. Her gait was slow, careful. Ace jumped over the side of the truck, getting to the back to help Landry get Miles down. How is he? Landry asked. Pissed beyond belief, and that's before he sees himself in the mirror, Ace said. Both men stifled a laugh as Miles pulled himself up, a huge red welt having formed on his forehead. The injury was swollen and angry, already turning purple around the edges. Landry undid the tailgate, letting it down so Miles could slide out rather than trying to climb. Come on, Miles, let's get you across the lake, Landry said. Landry reached out for him, only to have Miles slap his hand away. The motion was weak but defiant. Keep your damn hands to yourself, traitor, Miles said. "What the hell are you talking about, you belligerent dumbass? If it wasn't for him, that woman would have finished the job and caved your head in," Ace said. "I saw you take that bitch hostage, driving that gun into her ribs. You could have put them down and not blinked twice," Miles said. His words were slurred slightly, but the accusation was clear. He swayed on his feet, pointing an unsteady finger at Landry. "Yes, I could have, which would have given up our only bit of leverage," Landry said. "Bullshit, Landry. You were happy they knocked me on my ass, and you didn't want to do anything to harm them," Miles said. His eyes narrowed, suspicion written across his battered face. The bandage on his forehead was already seeping blood, the wound still fresh. "The only thing I wanted to do was get out of there in one piece. In case you forgot, one of their shooters blew Grant's head off," Landry said. "Yeah, Miles, God only knows how many more shooters they had on us," Ace said. Miles wasn't convinced, staring at the two of them. He stumbled a bit as he walked, slapping away Ace's hands as he reached out to steady him. His balance was off, the concussion clearly affecting him. "Get your damn hands off of me. I'm fine," Miles said. Miles staggered towards the docks, muttering as he went. His words were incoherent, angry mumbling that carried on the breeze. He nearly stumbled over his own feet twice, catching himself at the last second. "Yeah, don't worry about us. We'll get it unloaded for you," Ace said. Miles flipped him off as he walked away, prompting some laughter on the part of Ace and Landry. As soon as Miles vanished around the wooden partition, the two of them breathed a sigh of relief. The tension that had been coiled in their shoulders released. "Jesus, that was close," Ace said. "I agree. That could have gone a lot worse," Landry said. "How did you leave it with them?" Ace asked. His voice was low, careful. They were alone now, but old habits died hard. "I told them to get a message to Connor, saying we need help," Landry said. "Do you think he'll help?" Ace asked. Landry thought about it for a moment, remembering what Sammy had done to Connor's people during that first encounter. Connor had every reason to hate Sammy. "Based on what Sammy did to him and his men, he'll be on board," Landry said. Ace nodded as the two of them reached back into the truck, grabbing a few boxes of goods, beginning to walk to the dock. The boxes were heavy, filled with expensive bottles and cans. Landry adjusted his grip, feeling the weight of the caviar tins and imported oils. As they got the lake within view, they saw the boat with Miles and Skylar speeding across. The engine roared as it cut through the water, leaving a white wake behind it. Skylar sat hunched in the bow, while Miles stood at the wheel, one hand pressed to his head. "I guess we're taking the next one," Ace said. As Ace spoke, they saw some people on the opposite dock jumping into a boat to come help. The small craft pushed away from the dock, heading their direction. "Come on, let's stage this stuff. I want to get back to the house as soon as we can," Landry said. It took them half an hour to fully unload the truck and get it loaded onto the boat. They worked in relative silence, both of them lost in their own thoughts about what was coming next. Box after box was transferred from the truck bed to the dock, then from the dock to the boat. The liquor bottles clinked together with each movement, and the gourmet food felt absurd given the circumstances. The sun was starting its descent towards the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. As they approached the neighborhood dock, they saw a guard standing at the edge, staring at them with his arms crossed. His expression was stern, unreadable. He'd been watching them cross the entire way, never moving from his spot. As soon as they pulled up, he spoke. "Sammy wants to see the two of you," the guard said. "Can it wait?" Ace asked. "Can it ever wait with him?" the guard asked. Ace dropped his head before nodding in agreement. The question was rhetorical. They all knew the answer. "Take the golf cart out front," the guard said. Landry nodded to the man as he and Ace hopped into the cart. They drove across the neighborhood, a hint of fear creeping into them. The streets were quiet, people staying inside as the sun began to set. A few guards walked their routes, but otherwise the community was still. Windows were dark, curtains drawn. The sound of the electric motor seemed too loud in the silence. Every corner they turned, Landry half expected to see armed men waiting for them. "What do you think Miles told him?" Ace asked. His knuckles were white where they gripped the side of the cart. "Whatever it is, you can be assured he threw us under the bus," Landry said. Ace thought about it for a moment before reaching down and checking his sidearm, confusing Landry. He pulled the weapon partway out of its holster, checking the magazine. "If this is it, I'm not going down without a fight," Ace said. Landry smirked, giving his partner a nod as he pulled up to Sammy's house. The two of them got out, noticing that there were several guards inside the open front door. They stood in a line, watching the street. Their rifles were held at the ready, not quite aimed, but close enough. As they stepped inside, they could hear Sammy ranting and raving from the living room. His voice carried through the house, echoing off the walls. The place had been cleaned since their visit earlier, but it still smelled of alcohol and something sour. The two of them walked over to it, seeing a dozen guards, including Miles and Skylar, standing and listening intently to Sammy. The room was packed, everyone pressed together. Miles had a bandage across his forehead, and Skylar was still holding her stomach. They both looked like they'd been through hell, but they stood at attention like everyone else. These people, these animals, not only do they have the audacity to steal from me, to take what is rightfully mine, but they also killed one of our own. Just executed him, Sammy said. His voice rose with each word, the anger building. He paced back and forth like a caged animal, his movements sharp and aggressive. No hesitation, no remorse, just a bullet to the head because he dared to prevent thieves from stealing from me, Sammy said. Sammy continued pacing back and forth, looking around at the men and women in the room. It took him a moment to look up and notice that Ace and Landry had joined them. Rather than speak to them or acknowledge them in any way, Sammy just glared. His eyes were cold, calculating. The intimidating gaze caused Ace and Landry unease, both men fearing the worst about how Miles framed what happened. Landry could feel his heart pounding in his chest. The room was hot, packed with bodies, and the air was thick with tension. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he didn't dare wipe it away. Before they could say anything in their defense, Sammy snapped back into his rant. His attention shifted away from them like a spotlight moving to a new target. Tonight, we are going to mourn the loss of one of our own. We will drink to his memory, feast like the kings and queens that we are. And tomorrow, when the sun comes up, we are going to set out and exact revenge against those who wish to wage war on us. Tomorrow, they will feel our vengeance, Sammy said. His voice reached a crescendo, and he raised his fist in the air. The guards around him mirrored the gesture. Everybody in the room, outside of Ace and Landry, began chanting, "Vengeance, vengeance," over and over. The sound grew louder, more fervent. Fists pumped in the air, faces contorted with rage and excitement. It was like watching a mob work itself into a frenzy. It took a few moments before Miles and Sammy looked over in their direction, prompting both men to join in the chant, albeit at a lower, less enthusiastic tone than the others. Their voices blended in with the crowd, trying to go unnoticed. Landry felt sick to his stomach, but he kept his face neutral and his voice raised. Once Sammy and Miles looked away, the duo spoke to one another. Their voices were barely audible over the chanting. Ace leaned closer to Landry, his lips barely moving. "Landry, how bad is this?" Ace asked. "It's real bad, Ace. Real bad." The end.